how would you define a woman? Because you've asked other people up here to define how we would define a woman. How would you define a woman, Mr. Walsh?
An adult human female.
And how doesn't a transgender woman fit that definition?
Female.
Because they're not female. They have, you said that you are a biological male, correct?
I said I'm transgender. I might be intersex for all we know. About almost as many people in the world are transgender as intersex, and a lot of people don't know.
Well, but that's a different conversation. Intersex, that's a genetic anomaly, that's a medical condition. So that's a completely different conversation. That's also not a third gender. That's a genetic anomaly that occurs within the sex binary of male and female.
Matt Walsh, a well-known critic of woke culture, appeared on Dr. Phil to challenge Hollywood standards. Captured on camera, Walsh directly addressed these issues, backed by his strong principles. His argument surprised and upset many as he took apart woke ideology, leaving prominent Hollywood figures uneasy. Could this signal a significant change in cultural discussions?
If I was asked to define woke, I would say that it's a cult or a secular religion which teaches that society is systemically oppressive towards certain supposedly marginalized groups. The cult believes that our institutions were built expressly with the purpose of oppressing these groups, and the only way to combat the oppression is to tear down the institutions and restructure them according to the doctrines of the cult. Nothing can exist for its own sake. No institution can have any purpose above or beyond the enforcement of those doctrines. The ultimate goal, according to the cult, is equity, and equity simply means that the imagined oppression of their favored groups has been counteracted by policies that artificially elevate those same groups. And of course, in the woke religion, the Satan figure is the heterosexual white male, and each member of this group inherits the collective guilt of the oppressor.
Imagine this. Matt Walsh, famous for his strong opposition to woke culture, is set to appear on Dr. Phil's show. This is more than just a typical TV appearance. It's a clash of ideologies. Walsh knows he's entering a challenging environment, but he's resolved to stand firm. Understanding the stakes, he readies himself for the confrontation, stepping into a setting where he might be outnumbered and face a hostile audience. Yet, does he falter? Not dive into the pronoun debate.
I'm going to preface my question by stating that there's currently 5.6 million intersex Americans, which are people who are biologically not considered female or male because they have incorrect chromosomes during their process of being born. So my question is, why do you personally not support gender-affirming care when a majority of those who are seeking gender-affirming care are intersex individuals, considering that there are double the amount of intersex people that are Americans and adults than there are trans people? And why are you fueling the rights ideology of this trans panic when considering that this healthcare that isn't even really for trans people, they just happen to use it, is more for other issues? And by doing so, you're limiting people who are suffering to get those actual treatments that they need.
Okay, so let's just go through a couple points here. First of all, you're saying that the so-called gender-affirming care is not for trans people. So just for the sake of argument, what if I said, okay, I agree with everything you said, gender-affirming care should be available for intersex people, but not trans. Can we agree on that then?
Yeah, I would agree, but the laws that you're supporting don't. That's why I'm asking the question.
That's actually not accurate. Have you looked at the legislation?
Yeah, can I respond to you really quick?
Well, let me finish asking my question. What specific law would prevent someone with a genetic anomaly or a deformity from seeking some kind of medical care or plastic surgery?
So currently, one of the ways to fix intersex issues that you find down the line, which is currently typically infertility, for men, erectile dysfunction, when you figure it out when you're about a teenager, you have to start doing hormone therapy and hormone blockers, both of which are banned under multiple, including the one that I'm specifically referencing, and it's the Kentucky proposed state law, would make sure that intersex individuals would not have access to those, as it's considered under the umbrella of gender-affirming care, because technically it is affirming their gender, as they don't have a strictly male or female genitals or a reproductive system.
Okay.
Walsh made an insightful comparison between pronouns and adjectives, emphasizing the objective nature of language and its connection to biological reality. He argued that pronouns are not arbitrary labels that people can choose at will. Rather, they reflect biological truth. Just as adjectives describe concrete attributes, pronouns correctly represent a person's biological sex. Everyone has a unique relationship with their gender identity, including trans women, but Walsh contends that reducing gender to genetics or chromosomes misappropriates womanhood, making it an accessory.
I have to confess I'm skeptical of your reading of the Kentucky law. I have not read the exact language of that law myself, so I can't say for sure that you're wrong about that. What I do know is that, what I can speak to is the Tennessee law, for example, where I'm from, which bans these procedures, castration, mutilation, specifically mentions that if someone has an actual valid medical issue, then obviously they don't apply. It's the same thing as, we should ban cosmetic double mastectomies for gender confused women. Obviously, if you have breast cancer, you need a double mastectomy, then you would not be forbidden from getting that. It's very easy to write that language into the law. Now, that's the first thing. Going to your point about intersex, a couple of points here, a couple of things you said that I think aren't true. The first is you said, how many intersex people?
There's currently, the United States clarifies in their census that there's 5.6 million Americans, which is double the amount of trans adults in the United States.
5.6 million. Do you know how, for that figure, to arrive at that figure, do you know how intersex is defined?
Yes, intersex is defined as either having a chromosomal, here I actually have the exact definition pulled up on my phone from the US Census, because I wanted to make sure. It includes people with an extra or missing sex-linked chromosome, those born with other physical variations that don't fit into the categories of male or female. This is seen as someone who has breast, but also has a penis.
Yeah. The issue is that the caveat there about other physical variations. So one thing that you should be aware of is that the actual number of intersex people has been, over the years, drastically inflated.
This analogy highlights the importance of grounding language in biological facts. While supporters of self-assigned pronouns may favor subjective views on gender identity, Walsh argues that language must remain objective. Walsh believes that pronouns should be based on objective standards, not personal choice. He advocates for a linguistic approach that aligns with biological realities, free from subjective interpretations.
One thing that they've done is they've included, for example, a male who has an abnormally small penis size, for example, can be included as intersex under current definitions of the term. So what they're doing is they're taking people to sort of inflate the number of intersex people. They're taking people who their biological sex is very clear, but there might be some variances in their body, and then they're saying, well, that's intersex too. And I think the reason that they're doing that is, well, it kind of goes right to this conversation now, that the existence of intersex people is judged as very convenient for trans people in the LGBT movement. It's why they've included intersex in the pride flag, even though by your own accounting, intersex has nothing to do with gay pride, trans, got nothing to do with it. It is a genetic anomaly, it is a physical deformity, it's a defect, it's a disease, whatever word you want to use. That's what it is. It's got nothing to do with any of that. So there is a concerted effort to inflate those numbers because they find them useful. Last point, it's not that intersex people are not their own sex. Okay, you said that they wouldn't count as male or female. That's not correct. There are only males and females in the human species. There is no third sex. No biologist worth his salt would recognize any third human sex. It can't be defined, it can't be named. An intersex individual is a man or a woman whose biological sex, for this small minority of people, is harder to determine because of genetic anomalies that may affect, for example, their sex organs. But they're still male or female. Okay, there are only male or female gametes, ova or sperm. That's all that there are. There are no other options. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, can I ask a follow-up question really quick then?
Sure. Someone said no, but I'm going to say yes.
Okay. So, you said that it's either male or female. It's just harder in determining what it is. But in this time frame, would you say that there is technically a fluid system of what could be considered male and what could be considered female, such as with real life examples, people who do have breasts that look like female breasts, but they do have a penis? Would you say that that is a man?
Walsh's stance on the pronoun debate emphasizes the need for consistency in language and adherence to biological truth. He opposes self-assigned pronouns and calls for a return to language principles rooted in truth and accuracy. In examining the debate, Walsh critically evaluates gender ideology, questioning the definitions of terms like woman. He starts with the question, "What is a woman?" to reveal inconsistencies in gender ideology. While proponents of gender fluidity emphasize inclusivity, Walsh notes their failure to define key terms clearly.
There's a very good system for determining if there's a male or female, and it's right almost every time. I mean, it's right 99.9% of the time. It's only for a small minority of genetic anomalies that there's any kind of issue at all. Now, you just gave the example of someone with breasts and a penis. Well, again, you're taking a hypothetical person. I would need an actual individual, and depending on how they look, that shows how deep we sort of have to go to figure out what their actual biological sex is. But, you know, I will say that a male who develops breasts is obviously still a male. The last point I'll make about this is that another way of looking at it, there's no third sex, right? And the way that we know that is because there is no category of person who has the reproductive capacities of both male and female. So it's you either have the reproductive capacity of male or you have it of female, or you're supposed to have the reproductive capacities of a male, but you don't because of a disease, or female, but you don't because of a disease. You know, a third sex category, I suppose, would be someone who has both reproductive capacities. If you were to find somebody like that, well, now you have identified a true third sex individual, someone who does not fall under the category of either male or female. That sort of human being has never existed on the planet, and never will exist and can't exist, because there are only males and females. All right, thank you.
Walsh's main argument centers on the need for discussions to be grounded in factual accuracy. In a world driven by subjective interpretations, he rejects vague reasoning. He demands precise and coherent explanations from those who support gender ideology. By upholding principles of truth and logic, Walsh exposes the weaknesses in gender ideology and questions its validity. His refusal to accept unclear explanations challenges those who try to obscure the truth with ideological agendas.
Hi, I thought you had some really good points, but I just wanted to ask you about hybrids and stuff, because I'm here studying biology, and so we've learned a lot about genetic mutations and disorders and such, and there actually are hermaphrodite human beings where they have both ovaries and testicles, and that, I have it right here. It's actually a medical condition called ovotesticular disorder, and there are also other genetic disorders where people are born with XXY, XY, or just X or just Y and such. And while it may seem rare, there are hundreds of thousands of people born with this each year. And so going off of your fairy tale hybrid people, they do exist. And so I'm just wondering how that would play into your view of there being a spectrum of gender, because
These are people who can get pregnant and also impregnate someone else?
Yes. Hermaphrodites, they have both ovaries and testicles.
No. If such a person existed, that would certainly, I would not include that part in my next speech. But such a person does not exist. Now, intersex and now the genetic deformities you're talking about obviously do exist, and I expected someone to bring that up in the Q&A. I think it's a fine point to bring up. Two things I would say to that. Number one, that actually has nothing to do with transgenderism.
Walsh's critique of gender ideology highlights the importance of intellectual honesty and critical thinking. By questioning the inconsistent definitions of terms like woman and rejecting vague explanations, he promotes a more honest and thorough discussion on identity and gender. Matt Walsh's involvement in the gender debate is driven by a strong commitment to defending the truth, regardless of personal preferences or comfort.
Because when when we talk about transgender, we're talking specifically about intersex people, then we would just say intersex. But with transgender, most of the time, we're talking about men who, they don't have any deformity. They are just straight up men, clearly, and they are identifying as a woman. So even if I agree that what you're talking about is some sort of exception that actually would have nothing to do with the transgender topic. But I don't think it is an exception because, as I said, I think a true a true resident of the middle circle of the Venn diagram would be someone who has the reproductive capabilities of both genders. And no one like that exists. I mean, not to be crude, but there isn't anyone who can get themselves pregnant, right? And that doesn't exist in the human kingdom anyway. So I don't think. I think what you're talking about there are people who have deformities, and so in their case, it would be more difficult than usual to determine what their actual biological sex is, because the usual indicators aren't there or aren't as obvious. But that doesn't mean that they don't have a biological sex. It's just not as...
His motivation is not self-serving, but is rooted in a dedication to preserving objective reality against ideological distortions. Walsh views truth as essential for guiding societal discourse and behavior. He sees truth as the foundation of a just society and refuses to compromise its integrity. In the gender debate, Walsh not only challenges the distortions of gender ideology, but also addresses broader issues like fairness, privacy, and safety.
Okay, I'm not sure where this started or who posted it first, but this week a clip from an NBC medical drama called New Amsterdam has gone viral. And the show apparently had its series finale last year, so it had several seasons and it's over now. This clip is from, I believe, 2020. But if you haven't checked in with network television at any point in the last 20 years, as I haven't, this just gives you a glimpse into just how woke things have gotten. It's real bad over in network television land. It's even worse than you think. So if you haven't seen this clip yet, I'm going to play it for you. And keep in mind that this is 100% real. It is 100% not supposed to be a joke. Okay, this New Amsterdam, it's the first I've heard of this show, but it's not a satire. It's a drama. And so you're supposed to take this seriously as a dramatic moment.
The gender discussion fundamentally questions fairness in a society that prioritizes subjective identity over objective reality. There is a difference between biological sex and gender identity, and I wonder why it's so important, as it doesn't seem to be a major issue. By advocating for truth, Walsh challenges the idea that fairness can be achieved by ignoring biological differences and imposing arbitrary identities. Additionally, the gender debate has serious implications for privacy rights, especially in spaces traditionally separated by biological sex. He points out the potential consequences of blurring these lines, stressing the need to protect privacy to maintain dignity and autonomy.
Positive here, and I don't think enough people, I mean, everyone is making fun of this clip and having a great time with it, as well they should. I don't think there are enough people giving credit where it's due to the actor in this scene, because that was, I mean, you could make a very good argument that it was the worst dialogue ever put to film. Whoever wrote that script for that episode turned in arguably the worst script of all time. I mean, it's at least in the conversation. You can make a good argument for it. And yet the actor delivered it about as well as you could possibly hope. So it's just, how do you deliver a line like that? Can you imagine you're an actor, you're on a serious drama show, and I know that the actor's obviously probably woke also, but still, you're on a serious drama show, you're playing a doctor. It's a scene where you have to talk to a child's mother about the child's cancer, and the script requires you to say the line, "I think your son's tumor was caused by racism." How do you say that with a straight face without laughing? And the other thing is that you're in a woke, you're at NBC and you can't even, obviously you can't laugh, and that's going to ruin the take, but also no one around you on set can see you laughing at that, even though everybody else knows how funny it is. If you even laugh at it in a bad take that they cut, you still might get fired for laughing about racism. And so this is like, the pressure's on. I mean, there's a gun to your head on this thing, and you have to deliver that line. This is the challenge. They're saying, here, we're going to give you the worst line of dialogue of all time. And you have to deliver it well. If you don't, you're a racist. And I don't know, he did pretty well, all things considered. He did better than I could do. I'm not an actor, but ma'am, your son's tumor was caused by racism. Like I can't, I don't know. How do you deliver that line?
Safety concerns also play a significant role in discussions about gender ideology. Walsh highlights the potential risks, particularly in situations where vulnerable groups might be more exposed. Overall, Walsh's push for truth in the gender debate goes beyond personal motivations, addressing broader societal issues related to fairness, privacy, and safety. His unwavering dedication to upholding objective reality demonstrates integrity in a discussion often clouded by ideological distortion and confusion.
I don't know. You got to take an acting class for that. But notice something else. Everyone's so hung up on the racism causing cancer thing that they're ignoring the first part of that scene. And the whole first part is the doctor explaining that her son actually isn't experiencing any persecution, any oppression, any pushback for his race at all in real life. Yet he still feels like he is. It's internalized, right? That's what they say, internalized racism, internalized oppression. And that's the point of the scene, obviously. So the woke lefty writers who came up with this scene, the whole point was just that. They wanted to get this speech about internalized racism into the show. But it's a medical drama, so they had to link it to a medical issue somehow. Which again, that's a tough challenge too. I don't know. How do you so they want to give a speech about internalized racism. There's a medical show. How do you create a scenario where internalized racism is a medical problem? And this is the best they could come up with. And that was the real point, though, was to explain that even if it doesn't appear that a racial minority is oppressed, even if they aren't experiencing any visible oppression, they are still oppressed. Because it's internal, you see. It's all internalized. And that's just as real as anything happening externally. What does that mean? It means that you may not think that you're oppressing a racial minority. You may not think that you're guilty of oppressing them. But if they feel like you're oppressing them, then you are. And also you're giving them cancer. So that's what we learned from that. No medical misinformation there at all, of course.
When Matt Walsh confidently appeared on Dr. Phil's stage to challenge woke culture, Hollywood and its supporters braced for the fallout. Their reactions were varied and revealing, showing deep societal divides. After Walsh's appearance, Hollywood and proponents of woke culture responded with a mix of disdain, disbelief, and outright hostility. Some Hollywood figures dismissed his arguments as outdated and out of touch, labeling him as a relic of a bygone era. For instance, the transgender activist he debated struggled to accept Walsh's views.
Joe Rogan got in trouble this week for some offensive comments that he made on his podcast. And I'll play the clip. This is a clip, it went viral. People were upset about it. And it's kind of a Where's Waldo type of thing. Can you spot the offensive moment in what he says here? It's not as easy as you might think. Let's listen. It's so easy. It almost takes the fun out of it in a way. It's so easy to be controversial. It's so easy to upset people, to be provocative. You don't even have to try. I wish you did have to try. I'm accused of being a provocateur, contrarian. I'm just trying to upset people. I wouldn't put it past me to do that, okay? Because I do enjoy it. When a bunch of morons are upset, I do enjoy that. I do enjoy that spectacle. And when they're all screaming at me, I think it's hilarious. But I don't have to try to provoke. I'm really, because I can simply express really common sense viewpoints that I, of course, totally believe.
Others took a more aggressive approach, launching personal attacks and trying to damage Walsh's reputation instead of addressing his ideas. The backlash he faced highlighted the strong resistance in some circles to viewpoints that challenged the status quo. In a major publication like The New Republic, Walsh was named Transphobe of the Year for his views. His strong defense of truth and rejection of ideological conformity clearly upset those who rely on narratives of victimhood and oppression to maintain their influence.
And get that kind of reaction. So that's what you just heard there from Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan, provocateur. What did he... Nothing about that was surprising or even arguable. Yeah, there's an anti-white male sentiment out there. Of course there is. It's impossible to not notice it. It's everywhere. In fact, if I were to take issue with anything Joe Rogan said, it's the part where he said, we're getting to the point where if you're a white male, you're not supposed to talk. In fact, in many corners of society, and according to a lot of people, we're already at that point. There are a lot of people that think that Joe Rogan should stop talking because he's a white male and is privileged and doesn't understand the lived experience of oppressed people or whatever nonsense. So we are already at that point for a lot of people who think that if you're a white male, you should just stop talking. All you have to do is listen to them and they'll tell you. They've told me. I hear that all the time. That is one of the most common rebuttals to my completely common sense, non-surprising ideas and positions. One of the most common rebuttals is, you're a white male. Which isn't a rebuttal at all, obviously, but it's simply to point out my sex and race is supposed to be enough to shut down the argument. So yes, we are at that point. Listen, hit that subscribe button right now. Do it right now. I thank you for your compliance.
Furthermore, Walsh's challenge to dominant perspectives caused discomfort in some areas because it threatened to expose the weaknesses in their ideological foundations. By refusing to conform to woke culture and insisting on objective truth, Walsh dismantled the carefully crafted image of moral superiority. His willingness to challenge the status quo and speak truth to power directly threatened their dominance, prompting a defensive and hostile response. As the controversy subsided and Walsh's words continued to echo in influential circles, it became evident a battle for societal values was far from over. Despite facing strong opposition and relentless attacks, Walsh remained resolute, showing courage and conviction in a world full of moral ambiguity and intellectual dishonesty.